Hey, welcome to this edition of Maz's Musings. It's a bonus edition where I'm going to be talking about Disney Cruise Lines and specifically the Disney Wish, which my family took a vacation on this past February. Really piggyback off of the conversation that I had with Emily Carlson maybe a few weeks ago regarding Disney cruises and Disney vacations. If you haven't listened to that podcast, I really encourage you to go listen to it. It was a lot of fun. I'll readily admit that going into this vacation, I was a little bit skeptical because I'm not a big cruise guy. I've been on one other cruise in my life, and it was a nice time. But I'm not one who likes to spend a lot of time lounging on a vacation. And I also am not a huge beach guy. So I was wondering, while I knew that Disney would have its own take and its own flair on everything, the way Disney always does, and nobody does it quite like Disney, I was wondering how I would receive this vacation. So I get into that a little bit. I get into my impressions of the ship, and I answer a few questions that people have had since I came back. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you find it a little enlightening, and hopefully there's some information here that you can apply towards your decision as to whether or not you want to take this kind of vacation. And before we get into any of that, one thing that I've really come to realize is that this podcast operates a lot better and is a lot more engaging for the listeners when it's not just me talking to myself into a microphone. I've found that conversations that I've had, like the ones with Emily Carlson, the lengthy conversations that I've had with Greg Cameron about the NFL draft, those have been some really fun and some really engaging podcasts that have gotten some really great feedback. So keeping that in mind, that's something that I'm going to be working on. I'm going to be working on getting some more guests, diversifying some of these guests so that we're talking about some different subjects here. A lot of it's going to be sports related. A lot of it's going to be Disney related. And we'll throw some other things in there every now and then too. But it's all with the goal of making sure that this is a fun time for everybody involved. For me, for my guests, for my listeners. Really, this whole thing is about having some fun. So I'm going to do my best to bring the content that is going to really engage everybody, entertain, and be informative. All right, so getting into the Disney Wish. Like I said off the top, I haven't been a big cruise guy, largely because there hasn't been a lot of opportunity. I've been on one other cruise in my life. And so I tried to go into the Disney cruise with an open mind and not really having many expectations, just so that I could kind of experience it as it came. And I gotta say, the first thing right off the bat as far as Disney goes, and I'm going to jump to a clip here from Emily Carlson where she said this, and I'm just going to say she was absolutely right.
I know Disney's customer service is outstanding. And if you think that Disney World customer service is really good, wait till you get on this Disney cruise. Their customer service is above and beyond. From, the servers that will come to your table. They're with you the whole time you're there. They get to know you. They get to know what you like. They get to know your names. They always are asking, is everything okay? What can I do to make it better? And, I think people just love being there and they're so excited to help others. So yeah, customer service is amazing, but just Chris, wait till you get on this Disney cruise. You're going to be blown away.
Yes, Emily, you were exactly right. There was no doubt that this was the best customer service experience that I had ever had. Everybody on the Wish was absolutely phenomenal. I'm pleading some ignorance here because I don't know if this is the case on other cruise lines, especially our servers at dinner, our head server, the server for our table, and the assistant server just treated Megan like royalty, and really treated all of us like royalty, but especially we had the same dinner time every night, and we had another family that was seated at the table with us who coincidentally was also a family of 3 with a 6-year-old daughter. So that was just about as perfect as it could possibly be too. And the service was just outstanding. Every night, the server had a magic trick for the kids, and then for everybody at the table, he did some kind of like mind bender puzzle game that every time at the end of it, the adults were going, "Oh man, I can't believe I didn't see that." So that was really fun. The assistant server every night had a different origami figure for the girls. It was just really a great experience, and they knew what our preferences were very early on. We had dinner the first night, and then by the second night, there were already things that they had picked up on how we wanted our experience to go, and they made that happen for us without us having to ask the next time. So that was really great. Our room attendant, our stateroom attendant, was also really great. Really went above and beyond in terms of, little things like, arranging our daughter's stuffed animals in a certain way every night, or doing little things. Obviously, everyone does the towel things and everything like that, but there was just a little bit something extra, and the stateroom attendant, whose name was John, knew exactly who we were, knew our names, knew all about Megan, and really by the end of it, with all of the interaction that we had with these different people, by the end of the trip, Megan was writing thank you notes to all of them and giving them gifts because everything had just been so great. So some of my impressions of the ship itself: I'm somebody who loves to take pictures. I love Disney World because there's so much in terms of detail. So I'm the guy that you'll see who might be like laying flat on his back trying to get a picture of something from a unique angle because you can see a certain thing that you might miss otherwise, that the Imagineers put this kind of detail into. So just when I'm looking at these kinds of things, it's just like, how photogenic is it? I could have spent forever in the Grand Hall of this ship. I absolutely loved it. I loved the chandelier, which, from what I've been told, was designed to reflect and mirror the shape and style of Cinderella's dress, which I thought was pretty cool. It also had like a kind of a wishing star on the bottom of it. It was just really great, and just a lot of intricate details in that lobby area, that grand hall. I found myself a lot of times, I would be up earlier and I'd go get coffee, etc., and I'd take a walk down there just so I could take a few more pictures. I did all kinds of angles and things like that, and just really, really enjoyed that space. That was a space that really felt like it was, a place for royalty. As for other parts of the ship, the dining rooms were interesting. I really enjoyed the 1923 dining room, which was split into two parts. There's a Walt Disney part and a Roy Disney part. We were seated in the Walt Disney part, and it had a lot of sketches and copies of original drawings and artifacts from various Disney movies and characters and things like that over the years. It was really interesting to just kind of like look around and kind of feel the history of Walt Disney and where it had come from, where the company had evolved to. So that was very cool. There's also a Marvel dining room. I'm kind of a Marvel fan. I would say that I've enjoyed a lot of the Marvel movies, but I wasn't a huge comic book kid when I was a kid, so it hasn't always resonated with me the way that it has with others. I've also had a hard time keeping up with the frantic pace with which they've put out movies, so I've had a hard time kind of, following everything. I've played a lot of catch up over the past couple of years to, see some of the key movies, and I've watched some of the series since, but anyway, I'm getting off topic. Basically, Marvel isn't like my wheelhouse. So that was a fun dining room. It had a show. The show happened a lot on these video monitors that were around the around the room. It was interactive because there was an Ant-Man element, and you had to press a button, and at various times, it made it like the ship shrunk, or the ship blew up, and things like that. So that was fun, but honestly a little bit confusing. And then at the end, Spider-Man showed up. So it was fun from the aspect of, we got a picture with Spider-Man that Megan can show her cousins who are into that kind of thing. But ultimately, that was one that, truthfully, not being someone immersed in that part of the culture, I think some of it was a little lost on me and lost on my family. I will say, the last night that we were there, our dinner was at the Arendelle dining room, which was phenomenal. The show there basically is the engagement party for Anna and Kristoff, and it's a fun show. Even when the main characters aren't on the stage, there are musicians that are providing musical entertainment that I thought was really, really great. Some very talented performers. And obviously with all of these dinners, the dinners themselves were terrific. I'm not a food critic by any means. I'm not really even someone that you would call a foodie. But every night I walked away from the meal saying, wow, that was really, really great. Outside of that, some of my impressions were, I was a little surprised at the pool setup. And I don't know how this compares to other ships, admittedly. But the Disney Wish had a bunch of smaller pools. Most of them were on deck 11, I believe, which was like the main outdoor deck. And one of them had like this removable cover that essentially doubled as a stage. And that was the largest one on that deck. And then there were 4 smaller ones at the other end of the deck. And it really just seemed like, and they were just overrun with kids. There's another smaller pool, shallow pool, over by a Toy Story splash pad. And the splash pad, Megan absolutely enjoyed, absolutely loved. If you have kids who are 6 and under, that splash pad is right up their alley. Kids were having a blast, and it's a place where, it's chaotic because you got a bunch of 6 and unders running around, but it's not quite the same kind of chaos that you have with, a million kids in this little pool. Beyond that, there was another pool that was toward the forward part of the ship. I think it was called the Chippendale Pool, and that one appeared to be a little quieter, mostly because of where it was located. It was kind of separate from everything else. I actually stumbled on it by accident while I was just wandering around the ship one day. There's also another pool at the rear of the ship that is in the adults only section, which I gotta hand it to whoever engineered this ship. And I'm sure it's the same at other ships too, but this is based off my experience. You turn the corner, you go up to the adults only area, and you turn the corner and you don't hear a thing. They've engineered this ship in such a way that the sound, the noise, and everything that's coming from the kids playing in the pool on the deck, and the giant movie screen that's playing Toy Story or whatever the movie was that day, or that hour, honestly. They were constantly playing different movies on the deck along with all the other activities and things like that were going on. You couldn't hear any of that when we were in the adults area. We actually went to the adults area to meet up with Emily Carlson and her husband, Scott. Happy birthday, Scott, belated, by the way. And it was amazing how different the experience was. So there are these areas where, if you're looking for like much like the rest of Disney, where if you're looking for the bam Disney experience, it's there. If you're looking for something a little bit more laid back, you can find that too. So that was something that I found really, really interesting. Now, one thing that Megan really enjoyed, again, this is for those of you with kids, the Kids Club. I think they call it the Oceaneers Club on this ship. And it was amazing. Basically, it's an area that it comes with the cost of the trip, and it's an area where the kids can go. They're supervised using their magic band. They can actually be tracked by the staff as to where exactly they are. So when you go to pick them up, they just say, oh yeah, she's over there. And then somebody goes and gets her. And really, really cool. And Megan's big into crafts, and they had a great craft room there. And they have all kinds of different other activities. There are various rooms that are themed in different ways. There's a Frozen room. There's a Beauty and the Beast room. There's an area. There's a really cool Star Wars area that I was in there during the orientation hour, just kind of playing with things, and I was just like, I could spend time down here. And then there's a Marvel area, and so on top of all of that, one time when Megan was down there, when she came back, she said, "Oh yeah, we had a dance party with Mickey Mouse, and they taught us a dance," and so there are opportunities for the kids to go and have their own time and be supervised and still have a cruise experience. Like, you're not just sending them to a daycare where they're going to, color and stuff like that. They're still engaged and stuff like that if that's what they choose to do. And it also gives the parents a little bit of a chance to do some other things. Like, honestly, most of the time when Megan went to the kids club, it was after dinner, and then we'd go have a drink after dinner. One of the places that we really enjoyed was the Ale and Compass, which was a lounge that was one of the places that had some pretty good beer. And Eileen and I, being beer drinkers, really enjoyed that place. And we actually ended up a few nights going there to get a drink to bring with us to dinner. So those are a few of the observations from the ship. As far as our 2 stops, we did a 4-night cruise. So we had 2 stops. One was at Nassau, and the other was at Disney's Castaway Cay. The Nassau stop, we went to a wildlife preserve as an add-on excursion. Now, that's something that we paid extra for, but it was something that I would really encourage people to take advantage of. I cannot remember the name of the preserve off the top of my head, and I don't have it right in front of me. It was something like Ad Astria or something like that. But it easily looked up. It's on the Disney Cruise website when you're looking at excursions and things like that to do in Nassau. We got off the boat, and there was a bus that took us right there. So basically right from the port area, we got in a bus. The bus took us directly there. We had a great bus driver who kind of laid out some of the history and where we were going and what we were passing. So that was very cool. A little jarring. I was sitting up in the front, and it's a little jarring because they drive on the opposite side of the road. So there were a couple times that I was like, "What are you doing, dude?" But anyway, and at the preserve itself, really interesting. They had a flamingo show, and then the flamingos were really kind of free range. For those of you who live around here, you know how the Forest Park Zoo has the peacocks that are kind of loose. That's the way it was with the flamingos. They were just hanging out, and they said, "Yeah, you can take pictures with them and stuff. Just don't try to ride one, and don't pluck its feathers, and you'll be fine." But the guide for that was outstanding. It had a lot of great insight. Megan was really engaged by her, and Megan was asking a lot of great questions, and the guide was really engaging with the kids and making sure that they were involved. We got to hold tortoises. My wife got to hold something like a 35-pound tortoise. They had just recently had a bunch of baby bunnies born, so we got to see that. There's a lot of birds that were at this preserve, a lot of tropical kind of birds, a couple of servals. A lot of the animals that were there were rescued from situations where they were being kept illegally as pets. So they may not be native to the Bahamas, but they were in a place where the climate was good for them. So it wasn't necessarily a reflection of the wildlife on the island, but it was a great activity, engaging activity for us to do instead of just being on the boat while we were in port. So we did spend time on the boat while we were in port. That was an afternoon excursion, so we did get to spend the morning on the boat, and that was something that was interesting because it seemed like most people We got to port, and they got off the boat in the morning, and then kind of trickled back in the afternoon. Whereas we stayed on the boat in the morning and really kind of had the boat to ourselves. So, the ship. I've been told, don't call it the boat. It's not a boat, it's ship. Sorry. As for Castaway Cay, that was one of the things that I wasn't sure how enthused I'd be, basically because I'm not a big beach guy. But it was terrific. It was windy that day. It was very windy in the Bahamas that day. But it was also warm enough that it wasn't a detriment. One of the things that I had heard was that if it's too windy, it's very difficult to dock there, and I could see why, because the place where they dock the boat is very, very narrow. But we didn't have much of a problem at all, it seemed, with actually getting in there. And then once we docked and we got off the boat, got off the ship, it was there was a little bit of a walk to the beach area, but it wasn't that bad. And especially they had character stops along the way. So when we got right off the ship, Pluto was right there on the dock. So we got to say hi to Pluto. And as we moved along, we saw Donald. Captain Jack Sparrow was there. We didn't stop to see him because his line was already crazy. Goofy, Mickey and Minnie, Chip and Dale. So all of that was there even before you get to that beach area. And once we got to the beach area, we were able to find the spot, pretty easily. And we got off the boat a little bit later than some who immediately just jetted off the boat. And we still found that we were able to get a spot, and, it wasn't completely overrun in terms of like space on the beach and stuff like that. We were able to have Megan do some playing in the sand and stuff like that. And then we went in the water. Water was absolutely beautiful. But like I said, I'm not one who can spend a ton of time just on the beach. So one of the things that was nice was they also have a kids club on the beach. So Megan went there for a little while, and they apparently have a splash pad and sand to play in, etc., etc. It's the same kind of concept where they are supervised. And also, on top of everything else, they're making sure the kids are drinking water. Megan said that there was an announcement that everyone had to stop for a water break at certain points, and it wasn't optional, so they were keeping the kids healthy and and hydrated. For us, there was peace of mind that we could just kind of leave her there and she'd be well taken care of while we did some exploring on the island. So we did have the opportunity to go and really just walk around, explore. And yeah, I would say that it was still low key. It was still passive recreation, but we were able to kind of, not just sit on the beach. Now, if you want to sit on the beach, that's perfectly cool. I mean, that's, what this place is perfect for. But at the same time, if you're someone who does get a little antsy, you can go, walk. They have the Castaway Cay 5K course, which we wanted to do. And then we realized that it's for people ages 10 and older. So we weren't going to do that. And then after Megan went to the kids club, we wished that we had proper shoes so that we could do that. But anyway, Castaway Cay, great little spot. Totally worth taking the time to go down and check out, even if you're not the biggest beach person. So getting to some of the questions that people asked, I kind of put something out there on social media asking people, are there things you want to know about the ship, about this trip, those kinds of things. And I got a few responses. One of them I feel like I kind of went over a lot. It was basically asking how the Wish compares to other ships, especially other Disney ships. And like I said, I cannot make that kind of comparison because I haven't been on other Disney ships. Truthfully, I haven't been on other ships. So it's hard for me to say that. I've given some of my initial impressions about the ship. Somebody else asked kind of like what the size of the ship is and everything. And again, I'm no ship expert, but it was a large ship. But what I liked about it was it didn't feel large. Everything felt pretty accessible. So I think that is a nice thing with what they did with the layout of the ship is it didn't feel like, oh man, I've got to get all the way there from here. Ugh. So that, while it was a larger ship, I think I'm, like I said, I'm I'm not really well versed in the size and scope of vessels, but I think that it was a very approachable ship from the standpoint of getting around the ship and finding your way and knowing where things were. We kind of had a pretty good handle on the layout of the ship outside of a few things. By day 2 of the trip, we kind of had a good feel for the layout, so that was nice. The other questions that I got were a lot about the value, and I'm kind of throwing it to the conversation that Emily and I had about value, and here's that real quick.
And people ask me a lot, is it worth it? And I guess worth is something that's a little bit, it depends on what you define worth as.
Right. It's totally subjective. What is worth to somebody? Is it convenience? Is it money? Like, what is it that is worth it?
So yeah, value is so subjective. It really depends on what you're looking for. For me, this trip especially felt like it might be like the one time that we do something like this. So investing a little bit more in it felt like something that was worthwhile. But look, Disney vacations are not necessarily cheap. So whenever you're making a decision on taking a Disney vacation, the value is certainly something that people want to know about, and I certainly respect that. I kind of tried to walk somebody through an exercise, and I'm actually going to do that exercise again right now with you here. So just bear with me a little bit because I'm doing it as we're recording right now. Basically, I looked at what the price for a stateroom like the one that we had in the same time period, basically the same trip that we took, but for next year. I looked at that compared to what a Disney World vacation, comparable Disney World vacation would be during that same time period. So just bear with me for 1 second while I kind of pull up this information. Now, this is one of these things too that I'm hoping that you bear in mind that while I'm looking at this is all just first off the cuff. And secondly, these are the kinds of things that using a Disney vacation expert can really, really help with. We use We Do Travel Right. Emily's a friend of mine, and we have a lot of trust in them. But there are other agencies if that was the way that you wanted to go. This isn't an endorsement. This is just simply letting you know what our experience was. Using We Do Travel Right, we had Haley, who was absolutely phenomenal. We had a million questions about this because we hadn't done it before. So essentially, Haley took care of everything for us. She answered all of our questions, all of those little details that go into reserving things and making sure that things are the way that they're supposed to be. Haley and the team took care of. It really was. I don't think we would have had the trip that we had we not had Haley working with us. And something to keep in mind is Disney already builds the cost of using a travel agent into the price of their vacations. So you don't pay anything for the use of these kinds of agents or these agencies, which is something I think people don't really realize a lot of the time. Disney or whoever the company is, a lot of companies do this with different kinds of agents and agencies. They're paying the agents directly based off of the booked reservations. Whether you book the reservation or somebody else books the reservation, you're paying the same cost, and you're paying for the cost of that use of an agent, whether you use the agent or not. So I encourage people to use the agent because they can take a lot of the guesswork and confusion out of this process. So that's what I have to say on that. I am readily admitting that I am not an expert in this, and this is just based off of what I'm going off of on Disney's website. So looking at a deluxe ocean view stateroom with a veranda, which was similar to what we had on our cruise. It sleeps 3 to 4 people. The price for 2 adults and 1 child is $5,000, basically a little over $5,400. So I looked at what the cost of a deluxe hotel would be for that same time period. This is what I came up with and this is the time period for February vacation in Massachusetts next year, February school vacation. We're looking at, so for a 4-night stay that includes a 4-day ticket, a ticket to one park per day, plus the Disney dining plan, because remember, included in your cost of the reservation for a Disney cruise, most of your food is included unless you were to purchase a la carte options or, the alcohol, etc. So keep that in mind. I included the dining plan, keeping in mind that on the Disney cruise, the food is included. The Disney dining plan that I chose was the more expensive one for this exercise. There are 2 options. But anyway, so the 4-night stay I chose Wilderness Lodge because it's one of my favorites in terms of a deluxe hotel resort at Disney, with a ticket to a different park per day and the Disney dining plan, was just a shade over $6,000. So when you're comparing the two, if you're going deluxe to deluxe, so to speak, and I know it's not an apples to apples comparison, but this is just for the exercise, you're looking at actually probably a little bit more for a Disney World vacation. Now, there are ways to change the calculus on this. For our cruise trip, we also have to keep in mind that and I would recommend this for people, we traveled down the day before we sailed, and we traveled back on a day that wasn't the day we returned to port. It just created so much more flexibility for us, but that also means hotel rooms for those days. So we did book value hotels at Disney for those. So that's an added cost. So there are all kinds of different things that kind of change the calculus of this conversation, which is part of what makes value so hard to wrap your head around. I'm going to just, for the purposes of this, I'm going to look at a value resort as an option instead of going deluxe, because on top of everything else, the value resorts are really great too. We stayed at Pop Century the night before we sailed, and then after we sailed, when we got back, we were at All Star Movies. Megan really, really enjoyed All Star Movies with all the things that we could explore there. And we did the same with Pop, but on top of exploring Pop, Art of Animation is right across the way, so we did a lot of exploring of that one. I encourage you, if you are at a Disney resort, to explore the resort, and they also give you the opportunity to explore a bunch of different resorts too. It's one of their main selling points, as Emily stated here.
I love that. A question that a lot of people ask me, speaking of going from, the parks, using the monorail, things like that. People ask me a lot of times, are we allowed to go to the different resorts, or do we have to stay at our resort and just, that's where we are? I'm like, no, you can go to the different resorts, go explore. They want you to do that because that's the best sales tool that they have. They want you to go take the monorail and explore what the Grand Floridian or what the Polynesian looks like, or get on the Skyliner and get off at Caribbean Beach and go check it out. They want you to go and explore. So yes, you can definitely explore the other resorts.
Okay, so looking at All-Star Movies as an option as opposed to a deluxe resort, and comparing that to the cruise price, if you're looking at a package with a preferred room, including the dining plan and including the park tickets, you are looking at some much cheaper options. So I've just pulled that up, and the price that we are looking at, when you include all of those factors, the accommodations, the dining plan, and the park tickets, you're looking at just a shade under $4,000. So when you compare that to the value or the cost of the Wish for that, which is about $5,500, you can see that there are more ways to manipulate the costs and the cost effectiveness of your trip with a Walt Disney World vacation. There's a lot more flexibility. There are also some other ways to change the calculus here. Like, you don't necessarily need a dining plan. I included that because kind of trying to create a apples to apples comparison where the food is provided on a Disney cruise. Well, here's the food option for the resorts and the parks. But really, one of the things that we do a lot of times when we travel to Disney is we use a grocery delivery service, and they'll deliver right to the room. So we'll have breakfast before we go to the parks in the room. We'll make lunches in the room and pack a bag and bring them with us. Also, things like water. You can get cases of water, etc. So there are definitely more ways to increase the value of your resort and park visit as opposed to the more inclusive experience of the Disney cruise. So, like I said, value is hard to gauge a lot of times, but this was just an exercise to kind of illustrate how it can compare. One of the people who asked me this question about value is also, like me, a Disney Vacation Club member. And for those who aren't aware, that's basically like Disney's timeshare program. And that changes the calculus as well. You can use Disney points or Disney Vacation Club points towards a cruise, but I've been told, though I've never looked into this really from my standpoint, honestly, the impression that I've been given is that the value of, in terms of using your points and the money that you've invested in those points, to put that towards a cruise isn't worth it. The value isn't there when you compare to what you would be putting down from a monetary standpoint if you just paid for the trip outright. Of course, there are ways around that too. If you have a DVC, if you are a member of DVC, you can rent out your points, and that could be a way that you kind of finance the cash spending on your trip. So there are all kinds of ways that you can manipulate your situation. And truthfully, this is one of those things why it's so good to use an agent, because they can kind of lay out all these kinds of different scenarios for you and different solutions if you're finding challenges. Like I said, a Disney vacation is always going to be an investment at one level or another. So I encourage you to do all of the research, to reach out to an agent, even if you're just having preliminary conversations. A lot of the agents don't require any kind of commitment to talk with them and determine if it's something that's feasible. But yeah, there are certainly ways that you can increase the value of your vacation, especially more so at a resort hotel on Disney property and at the parks than you can with the more inclusive model that the cruise line provides. So those are my answers to these questions. I hope that it was somewhat helpful and enlightening. Like I said, I'm not an expert here. I'm just a guy sitting in front of a microphone right now wearing his Baby Yoda Hawaiian shirt that he got specifically for the trip, just so that I can get in the mood for this. I'm just trying to give some help and some guidance to people. So, like I said, these are some impressions, some things that you can look at, some things to think about if you're thinking about doing this kind of trip. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to shoot me an email, mazasmusings@gmail.com. You can find me on X at mazasmusings. Hey, thanks for joining me for this bonus podcast. I hope that my ramblings made some kind of sense to somebody, but the bottom line is a Disney cruise vacation is truly a special experience. My family really enjoyed it, and it's something that I am going to cherish the memories of for a long time. While I've got you here, just a reminder to check out the Reminders podcast, So That Reminds Me. It's coming out this week. Also, if you're a sports fan, specifically a Patriots fan, check out the ongoing series that my friend Greg Cameron and I have been doing on the Patriots NFL draft prospects, especially those players who aren't necessarily those top guys that everybody's talking about. As I mentioned before, anytime you want to hit me with a question or a comment, shoot me an email at mazasmusings@gmail.com. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Mazasmusings. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.